Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to do a video that I've been thinking about for a while now, and this is my follow-up video to my 5-star TBR prediction video. This is the results of reading those 5 books that I had predicted way back when that were going to be 5-star reads for me. The video that I filmed predicting my 5-star reads from my TBR I posted about 5 months ago, and I will link that original video down below. The idea for the 5-star TBR prediction videos, of course, came from Mercedes over at Mercy's Bookish Musings, and I will link her channel down below as well, where in one of her videos where she talks about the 5-star TBR process, where you would take 5 books off your TBR stack that you think, for whatever reason, various reasons, are going to be a 5-star read for you. So there were 5 books. I have now read all 5 of these books, and I will go through each of them for you and talk a little bit about them and tell you how I did with them. I will tell you right off the bat that I had mixed results with these books. Some of them were 5-star reads, some of them were not 5-star reads, but none of them were terrible reads, so that's very good. But some were better than others. So let's just get to them. The first book that I predicted was going to be a 5-star read was The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This is the 3rd book in her fantasy trilogy, the Broken Earth trilogy, and I really can't talk about this one on its own. And I also really can't say that this book is a 5-star book on its own. I think that the trilogy for me in its entirety is a 5-star read, but this book on its own, obviously you couldn't read it just on its own because you'd have to read the ones previous to that. But also, for me, a lot of times the 3rd book in a fantasy trilogy, while I will enjoy it because I've already come to love the characters and I'm already invested in the story, there's certain things about a 3rd book in a fantasy trilogy that oftentimes don't work for me. There's sections that sort of drag, that feel like filler, when you're just wanting to get to the resolution of some of the storylines. And I think that that was the case for me with The Stone Sky. Overall, as I said, the whole trilogy was definitely a 5-star read for me. I love the diversity of the characters within the story. I love the uniqueness of the setting. This world that sort of in the future, it maybe is our world with all the continents melded back together. The magic system, which is based on geology and geologic forces, which was very interesting and unique. The mother-daughter relationship between the 2 main characters that we follow, which was very fascinating. So many things that I loved about this story. But there were sections in here in this last book in the trilogy that I had troubles with. So overall, 5-star. This book individually I gave a 4-star in my reading log, and I think I would stick with that rating. I do plan to read the entire trilogy again because I think that there are things that I missed in trying to sort of race through to see what happens to the characters, which happens a lot for me in a fantasy trilogy. But overall, very much enjoyed and would recommend the Broken Earth trilogy. The second book that I predicted would be a 5-star read was Hunger, A Memoir of My Body by Roxane Gay. This is a nonfiction book, and it was absolutely a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved every bit of this memoir. Roxane Gay is so honest and raw and real in her writing. She writes very cleanly, without a lot of frills. You can see that I tabbed away throughout this book. You can see that I underlined throughout this book. And I just want to read a section so you can get a feel for Roxane Gay's writing style. I did well academically. That's how I had been raised, to be excellent, to never be satisfied with anything less. A B was a bad grade, and if I received an A-, I could still do better. So I did better. I did my best. I was always very high-strung about school for many reasons, not least of which was pressure to perform and the comfort of knowing that schoolwork, at least, was something in my control. I can totally relate to that passage. I was pretty much the exact same way with grades when I was a kid. This book is difficult to read in parts. Roxane Gay does not shy away from discussing the sexual violence which she experienced as a 12-year-old girl and how that impacted her personal body, the size of her body, how she looks at her body, how she looks at other people's bodies. And it's difficult to read about that at times. But she also doesn't shy away from it, and she's very forthright in what happened to her and how she dealt with it and how her family dealt with it and how they're still dealing with it to this day. And I just thought it was beautiful. I think it resonates with any woman in today's culture, and I wish everybody would read this book and try to understand where people are coming from that aren't, you know, the stereotypical thin that our culture says is the right size to be. Excellent book. The next book that was on my list was Tell the Wolves I'm Home by Carol Rivka Brunt. This novel is about a young girl who loses her beloved uncle, and there's some mystery surrounding his death, why he's been ill, why he is dying at such a young age. And over the course of time after her uncle dies, she comes to know a friend of his, and through learning about this friend, she comes to know more about her uncle and starts to piece together the reasons why she and the rest of her family were sort of kept at arm's length from her uncle. This takes place in the 80s. It takes place in the city, and it's about the AIDS crisis from a very personal family point of view. I raced through this book. I felt this is, if not a 5-star read, then pretty darn close for me. It was one of those books you start reading it and you just spend the entire weekend doing nothing but reading, because you just have to know what's going to happen to these people. You get invested in the family. Nobody's perfect in this story, but everybody's just trying to do the best that they can. And it's just a heartwarming and heartbreaking family story that also brings in a time period in our history that isn't talked about a lot in the fiction that I read anyway. So very much recommend Tell the Wolves I'm Home. Excellent novel. The next one that was on my list was So Much for That by Lionel Shriver. And this book was not as successful for me. This novel is basically taking on the healthcare system in the United States. It's the story of a marriage. Our main character, I can't remember, Shep, he has been saving his entire life for after he's done working. Basically, he wants to save enough money so that he can retire and move to some third world island somewhere and live on the beach and basically be beholden to no one and be able to relax. And he plans to do this at a younger age than most people retire. And he puts up with a lot of bullshit in his regular life with the view in mind that it's just for a short period of time. I don't have to put up with this forever, but as soon as I save enough money, I'm out of here. And he has sort of taken it for granted that his wife, of all these many years, is going to be on board with this. And as time has gone on, it has become more and more clear to Shep that his wife is not on board with this idea. She is not ready to like cash in and toss their entire lives and move away to some third world country. And so Shep has decided to issue an ultimatum. He's going to give his wife the ultimatum of, I'm done, I've quit my job, I've cashed out my retirement, I'm going, you can either go or we're done, basically. And the day that he issues this ultimatum to his wife says, yeah, no, I've been diagnosed with terminal cancer and we've got to fight this thing and I need you and you can't go anywhere. So the rest of the story unfolds from there. There's, you know, Shep's best friend and business partner and their family and they have a severely handicapped child, and so they've been already dealing with the healthcare system for years and years, and Shep is about to learn what the healthcare system is going to do for him and his wife in this situation where she has a rare form of cancer. Lionel Shriver writes books where basically nobody is very likable in her stories. Everybody is kind of an asshole, and this book is really no different than other Lionel Shriver books that I've read and heard about. And so it's difficult to maintain compassion for people who are just acting like jerks so much of the time. And Shep seems to be a martyr throughout a lot of this book. He seems too good to be real. He seems too selfless to be real. And so the whole book I'm like rolling my eyes at Shep. Like, come on, nobody's willing to sacrifice everything that they've hoped and dreamed forever. Nobody's willing to put up with the kind of crap that he puts up with, humiliations, the way he's treated by everyone around him. Like, he's just a schmuck, and he just takes it without ever fighting back. From his kids to his wife to his best friend to his boss, like, everybody just craps all over Shep all the time. And I was just totally frustrated with him. And then the last, 50 pages of the book kind of changed my mind about Shep. And I ended up really liking how this book ended. It rang true to me at the end. And it didn't totally make up for the frustration of the rest of the book, but it did help me come to a better feeling about this book. So while I would not say this was a 5-star read, I will say that in the end I did enjoy it. I had frustrations with it, but I think Lionel Shriver does a really good job of writing characters that are realistic, and certainly it is incredibly frustrating to read about the healthcare system and how it basically doesn't help people, and how it's just all about the money and how you can save your whole life and then lose it all in a very short amount of time, depending on the basic lottery of whether or not you have good health or not in the end. So that was much food for thought in this novel. I'm very glad that I read it. And then the last one, I do not have the physical copy of the book any longer, which will probably tell you right off the bat my basic feeling about this novel. And the novel is, let's see if I can hold that so you can see it, Henrietta's War by Joyce Denys. And this was a historical fiction novel. It was set in the time period of World War II, and it was an epistolary novel, and it was fake letters, basically, that were published in a periodical at the time that would describe what the folks back home were doing in small English villages while the boys were away fighting the war on the continent. And the letters were designed to sort of keep people's spirits up and to show that, regular folks on the home front were supporting the soldiers in the war, and that, they were still doing fine regardless of the deprivations and the fear of bombs and all of that sort of thing. And the premise of this was very interesting and very much enjoyable. I like a small English village, charming sort of historical fiction. I love epistolary novels normally, but the characters were kooky and crazy, and which was interesting, but the book just was very repetitive. Even though it was short, it just felt like I was reading the same thing over and over again. It was kind of like, yeah, I get the point. These quirky characters and these elderly people that have their little things, but everybody's still, supporting the boys that are fighting the war, and everybody's on board with the war effort, and, everything's still, very English back home. It just was too repetitive and just got really a chore to finish. So that one was not successful for me. I think I only ended up giving it a 3 stars, and that's probably generous in the end, and it was pretty forgettable, and so I've already traded that book in. So that's it. Those were the 5 books that I predicted would be 5-star reads for me. Overall, I think, you know, there was mixed success there, but I think all of the books had moments of enjoyment. So none of them were true stinkers. None of them were DNFs. None of them were, you know, 1 or 2-star reads for me. And so that's good. But it just goes to show me, because in amongst it took me 5 months to read all these books, and in between I read other 5-star books off my TBR that had been sitting there when I chose the ones that I thought were going to be 5 stars, and I was totally blown out of the water. I was like, I can't believe this is a 5-star book. I never would have predicted that this book was a 5-star read for me. Like, one of them at the top of my head was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I picked that up off my TBR at the end of the year and read it, and that was a total 5-star read for me. And so it just goes to show me that I'm not super great at picking what books are going to be 5-star reads for me, and I'm always being surprised at what I do end up loving from the books I read. And that, to me, is the joy of reading, is that discovery, that feeling of, you know, I have all these books on my TBR, there's all these books at the library, or all these books in the world, and who knows what's going to be a 5-star read. And that's why you keep reading, for that excitement of when you pick up a book and you read a little ways in, you're like, oh, this book's going to be amazing. And I love that. It's one of the best things about being a reader. It's one of the greatest joys that there is in discovering a wonderful book. So that was a fun experiment to try these 5-star TBR predictions, and I may do it again in the future. I certainly have enjoyed watching everyone else's predictions and to see how they got on with their books. I hope this video was interesting to you, and please let me know if you have read any of these 5 books and what you thought of them in the comments below, and I'll look forward to talking to you later. Bye.